call this regular council meeting to order. Before I do so, I want to acknowledge that the land upon which we are all located as we participate in this meeting is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Mississaugas, and the Anishinaabe people, many of whom continue to live in this area and add to the diversity and richness of our community. Madam Clerk, the roll call.
All members of council are present, Your Worship.
Thank you. Just a couple of announcements, and I don't know if George Stojanovich is there, and if he received my email, I'm going to ask him shortly to just provide a little bit of a background to the rain event that we had on Saturday. Mr. Stojanovich provided us with a memo, and I'm going to let him just give some background for the benefit of the community so that they have an understanding of the magnitude of the storm. I believe it was a 1 in 50 year storm, and how staff attempted to manage the situation. But first, I wanted to mention that today, the Minister of Security for the federal government, Bill Blair, announced that commencing August the 9th, the Canadian border will be open to all American residents and those authorized to live in the United States who have been fully vaccinated, who can provide a negative COVID test for the previous 72 hours. And there may be some random testing in Canada, but that will only be random. So if you've been doubly vaccinated or fully vaccinated in the United States, you can come into Canada starting August the 9th. And for children under 12 years of age who cannot be vaccinated, there will be, again, the negative test within the 72 hours prior to that time. Right now, they're supposed to isolate. I understand that there may be some fluctuation on that as we proceed, but I would urge anyone interested in crossing the border into Canada to make sure that they check the federal website on this, because there will be some mischaracterization of information going forward. I was listening to the radio prior to reaching town hall, and there was some nuancing of the new order that isn't quite accurate. As of September the 7th, if the metrics all continue in their positive trajectory, international visitors will be allowed to come to Canada without the necessity of quarantining, provided they have been fully vaccinated and can provide a negative COVID test for the 72 hours prior to arrival. And I'm advised that international students have been allowed to come to Canada so far, but they are required to quarantine. But after September 7th, that will change, presuming all metrics remain the same. So that's where we are, and there will be further announcements in the days ahead. The interesting aspect of this is that the United States has not yet indicated that there will be any changes to its approach to essential travel, easing of the border restrictions, or reopening of their border. And the Minister of Security indicated to the border mayors this morning that his understanding is that their border restriction order will simply roll over on July the 21st for a further 1 month. However, that does leave open the opportunity for the United States to make changes between now and August the 9th, and hopefully they'll be able to move forward on some easing of border restrictions themselves so that Canadians can go to the United States. Right now, there's no change really for Canadians. If you're not an essential traveler, you don't have a specific exemption, you can't travel into the United States by land. The other thing that I would mention is, and it's often lost, that there's tremendous logistical aspects to the easing of border restrictions and reopening the border. And I think many people fail to understand or appreciate the fact that there are significant human resources, technical resources that need to go into this type of thing. And whereas Canada has the one border, the United States has two borders it has to deal with. And I would suspect that that's part of the reason why it's taking them a little longer to get to where we are. However, we've had good numbers here in Canada. And so the final comment that I want to make is these decisions by the federal government with respect to our border are based solely on the science and public health concerns, so that all of this helps to inform the federal government as to the changes that they make. I will say, I know that Councillor Dubanow has been concerned about this particular issue in terms of children. This is a Public Health Agency of Canada decision, so that when they make the rules, those are the rules. Councillor Diodati and I both asked Minister Blair for some clarification on that. And so there will be some further dialogue on that particular issue as we go forward. So that's the situation with respect to the border easing and the gradual reopening, all premised on safety and public health concerns. Those are the announcements, Mr. Stojanovic. Did you get my email yet?
I did, Mayor Redekop. I did. Yep.
You did provide council with a memo with respect to what transpired on Saturday. And I wonder if you could maybe provide a synopsis just to give a little bit of background to the residents of Fort Erie so that they know how significant this event was, why things happened the way they happened, and the reaction and response by municipal staff.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. So just as a brief synopsis, the rainfall event from Saturday was a very large event. So based on the regional rainfall data, we received over 100 millimeters of rain over about 29 hours. That was at a station on Industrial Drive. And it was a peak intensity of 31 millimeters an hour of rainfall. So you can imagine 30 mils of rain falling in an hour. It was a little bit lighter in terms of rainfall out in Crystal Beach. We had about 70 millimeters over about a 24-hour period. And the intensity there was quite less than what we experienced sort of in the heart of town. So that type of rain event, we haven't crunched the numbers in terms of frequency of an event, but we probably are estimating the event to be 1 in a 50-year storm or thereabouts. We did receive 166 calls through our after-hours call center, and all calls were distributed both to our roads and stormwater group and our water wastewater group for immediate action. There was some concerns that folks couldn't get through the lines. The service is able to take 3 individuals concurrently, and if those folks are on the phone with the customer service reps, then they would get a busy signal and they'd have to call back. But from looking at the logs, there's only about maybe 50 or so folks that had to call back, and they more than likely did get through, and we have reached out to them and looked at what the particular issue was. Just as a note here in terms of bypass flooding, there was a need for some bypass flooding at 3 different stations, so Dominion Road, Nye Road, and Winger Road, and the duration of pumping was not terribly long. It was somewhere between 7 to 11 hours or so of bypass pumping, and all of the bypass pumping ended around midnight on Saturday. There was about 40 complaints for our water and wastewater staff in regards to basement flooding, and each and every single one of those has been and will be inspected to determine the root cause. There could be a number of different issues at any particular location, including could be a sanitary sewer surcharge, but it also could be private side weeper connections, some pumps not keeping up, or problems with the check valves. The road staff attended to a number of complaints in regards to roadway flooding and ditches flowing over full. And really, this is to be expected in a type of event like this. The capacity of the minor system or the storm sewer system, the ditching system, that system really only conveys about the 5-year storm. When we're talking about a much more significant event, the roadways then actually become the conveyance system for the stormwater. So very typical, very normal, and the infrastructure performed really as expected. Some of the locations where we did get significant complaints in terms of roadway flooding, there was Crescent Park. We had a number of complaints there, Fort Erie proper, and in Thunder Bay, which is expected. We do have a number of low-lying areas out in Thunder Bay. In regards to the water wastewater basement flooding issues, we had a number of issues in Crescent Park. There was 20 there, Fort Erie proper had 10, and Stevensville and Black Creek had 7. So just in summary, the town's infrastructure did perform well. We had over 20 staff diligently working away throughout that event and beyond, helping out residents at every step of the way. And as a note too, I've mentioned in the report that the town's asset management plan does require the town to consider climate change impacts as it relates to infrastructure. And certainly this storm and storms such as this will be considered with the asset management plan and any future necessary upgrades in infrastructure that may be required.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stojanovich. And just for perspective, 31 millimeters is 1.22 inches in an hour, and that's a significant amount of rain. But I did want to thank you and your staff for being on top of this throughout the day. I know that a number of councillors would have been in touch with you with respect to concerns and complaints raised by residents, and I want to commend council for your diligence in responding. I heard some really positive comments from residents about some of the councillors and staff in responding. So please thank the members of your staff, also the individuals even outside of your staff who participated and assisted. We very much appreciate it. And council members may have some questions of you later under new business, Mr. Stojanovich. So keep your memo out. That's it for announcements. There is one addendum this evening, and that is the deletion of report PDS 64-2021, which will come back to us at a later date. That is under item number 11 of our agenda. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I have two this evening. The first one is PDS 64-2021. That's the request for permission to apply for minor variance applications within 2 years of a zoning bylaw amendment in Peacebridge Village Phase 2 subdivision. As I live in a subdivision developed by Ashton Homes Western Limited that has not yet been transferred to the municipality. I have the same conflict on PDS 64-2021. I know it's been deleted with the addendum, but since it's on the agenda, that's the proposed draft plan of vacant land condominium and zoning bylaw amendment for 397 Garrison Road. Also, Ashton Homes Western Limited, same reason I live in a subdivision developed by them that has not yet been transferred to the municipality. And that's all I have this evening, Your Worship.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? There being none, there's several upcoming public meetings. One is an open house with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment at 4002 Erie Road. That will be held on Thursday, July the 22nd at 5 p.m. By Zoom. Anyone wishing to participate should contact Anamika Dilwaria by contacting her by email or at the town 871-1600 extension 2507. There's also an open house on with respect to the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 4197 Niagara River Parkway. That will be on Wednesday, July the 28th at 5 p.m. again by Zoom. And again, Anamika Dilwaria will be the town staff member. If you wish to participate, you should contact her either by email or you can call her at Town Hall extension 2507. And finally, there's a public meeting for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment of 3719 Highland Drive. That will be held during the council meeting on August the 9th, 2021 at 6 p.m. Again, via teleconference. And anyone wishing to participate should contact Daryl Vanderveen with the town 871-1600 extension 2508. The information report with respect to that public meeting will be available to council and the public August the 4th, 2021. We do have a public.
I apologize. I forgot a third declaration that I forgot to do. It's actually Councillor Butler's motion, the amendment to the animal control bylaw. Same situation. The company I work for has provided contracted services for the SPCA, and that may impact their operations. I apologize for interrupting you. I just wanted to mention it before we moved on, Your Worship.
Yeah, no, not at all. That's quite fine. Best to do it while we're there. Okay, so that then, now that I've been knocked off my train, that takes us to public meetings. We have a public meeting this evening, and I see Councillor Butler smiling. I really have to pay attention or I lose focus. I've got a good memory, but a short one. We have a public meeting this evening with respect to 2751 Nye Road proposed zoning bylaw amendment. This is a digital meeting. Those who wish to participate should have received either a notice or information from our website with respect to how to log in. Everyone has to be mindful if you're participating of background noise, so you will be muted until such time as you participate in the meeting. This is a process under the Planning Act whereby a member of staff will provide council with background information. This evening, that staff member will be Anamika Deloria. And after she has provided us with the background information through her presentation, members of council may ask questions. Thereafter, I will ask the clerk if she has received any, we'll first go to the proponent or the proponent's agent if they wish to make any comments to council and answer any questions that council members may have. I will then ask the clerk if she has received any information since the preparation of the report that she needs to bring to our attention or to read into the record. And thereafter, I will ask if there's anyone who wishes to speak in favor of the application. And after that, if there's anyone who wishes to speak in opposition or ask questions of members of council. If you wish to address council, you have to raise your virtual hand, and depending upon the digital mechanism that you're utilizing, that may be in the top right-hand corner, it might be in the bottom of your screen if it's a laptop. If it's on a mobile device, then I guess it's in the bottom left-hand corner of your mobile device. You raise your hand when Mr. Butler asks if anyone wishes to address council. He will then recognize you and bring you into the meeting. And at that point, you will be unmuted. You can activate your video and then you'll be able to address council. And if council don't leave before councillors have a chance to ask any questions in the event they do. And thereafter, once everyone has addressed council that wishes to, I will declare the meeting completed or closed. Madam Clerk, did I miss anything? Okay.
You have everything, Your Worship.
Great, thank you very much. So then, Ms. Dilwari, why don't we start with you and you can commence the public meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. With your permission, can I share my screen?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. An application for a zoning bylaw amendment has been submitted by Lee White, who represents Christine and Jesse Savage, owners of the subject property known as 2751 Nye Road. The purpose of the application is to facilitate the creation of a residential building lot for a future single detached dwelling. Notification for tonight's public meeting was provided in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act by placing a notice in June 24th, 2021 edition of Fort Erie Post newspaper. In addition, property owners within 120 meters were mailed a notice of complete application and public meeting on the same date. This is an aerial photograph of the subject lands as well as the surrounding neighborhood. The subject lands are located on the southeast corner of Nye Road and Centralia Avenue North in the rural area of the town. This slide shows the location of the subject lands. As mentioned earlier, the subject lands are located on the southeast corner of Nye Road and Centralia Avenue North. Nye Road and provincially significant wetlands are located to the north. To the south are agricultural lands and provincially significant wetlands. To the east is single detached dwelling, provincially significant wetlands, and a watercourse. To the west is single detached dwellings and Centralia Avenue North. This slide shows the current official plan designation for the subject lands. The lands are designated rural in part and environmental protection in part on Schedule A of this official plan. This slide shows the current zoning of the property. The lands are zoned rural in part, hazard zone in part, environmental protection in part, and environmental conservation overlay in part. This slide shows the natural heritage features existing on the subject property and on the abutting properties. Schedule C of the official plan identifies provincially significant wetlands, woodlands over 2 hectares existing on the easterly portion of the property, No natural heritage features are located on the westerly portion of the property. The easterly portion of the property contains a floodplain associated with 6 Mile Creek and is identified as a critical fish habitat on Schedule C1 of the official plan, and it's located entirely on Part 2. There is no floodplain on Part 1. This slide shows the proposed development and the requested zoning amendment. The existing dwelling and few ponds are located on Part 1. Part 1 contains a man-made pond, and lands to the north would be used for single detached dwelling and a septic bed. The applicant is requesting to rezone the subject lands to a new site-specific rural zone. The site-specific regulations are requested for a reduction in lot area from 6 hectares to 1.26 hectares and a minimum lot frontage from 95 meters to 81.8 meters. Part 2 complies with the lot frontage requirements. The required is 95 meters and the proposed lot frontage would be 303.07 meters. Part 2 would be a little bit would be shy on lot area, where the bylaw requires 6 hectares. Part 2 would provide a lot area of 4.7 hectares. The hazard, environmental protection, and environmental conservation zones will be maintained on Part 2. No changes are proposed to those zones. The public information open house was held on June 10th and was attended by staff and owner's agent. None of the area residents attended the meeting. The report before council is a recommendation report, as there are no interest from public and no concerns from the commenting agencies. These are few pictures of the site, looking at the subject property from Nye Road. Looking east on Nye Road. This is an aerial view of the proposed and the remnant parcel. This would be the remnant parcel, which is highlighted in gray, and the new parcel would be highlighted in green. This is looking north on Centralia Avenue North. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dilwaria. Do any members of council have any questions? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a question with all the recent flooding in the area. It's so close to the areas that have been prone to the flooding, if that's going to be a major concern with this property, and that's the concern I have.
Ms. Dilwaria, would you have any knowledge as to whether that aspect was looked into with respect to this application?
Through your worship to the councillor, the application was reviewed by NPCA because they are the ones who look at the regulated feature, that's the water course, and they had no concerns with flooding.
Speak further, Councillor Butler.
Yeah, I'm really not convinced by that, to be honest with you, especially what we've went through over the weekend. And I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity for us to add another major rain event to take a look at that aspect to see if it does flood into the areas that are proposed, because I would hate to have that be an issue later on.
So just so that I can maybe understand, your concern is that 6 Mile Creek may overflow its banks and affect this particular parcel? Well, I can tell you that part of Nye Road was flooded out on Saturday. That would have been further to the east. I don't know about this particular thing, but Mr. Stojanovic, do you recall whether there were any concerns about flooding on Nye Road in the vicinity of Centralia?
Mayor Redekop, no, I'm not aware.
Is that something you could follow up on?
We certainly could.
Okay.
Just so that I can just interject here, I did do a lot of drive-bys on Saturday, as probably many other councillors did for their residents, and I did experience flooding near Centralia. That's why I'm asking if that particular property has any bearing. Anyway.
So was it, just to be clear, I know that there's been some flooding issues north of Nye Road. In the area of Centralia. Yeah, because that's where the creek goes. Were you right at Centralia in Nye when you noticed this?
I went right up to the garrison. So as I was driving, and I didn't pay any particular attention to whether it was an I road or not, to be honest with you. So I apologize, but.
Oh, that's quite all right. We may not have that information immediately available. Anything further, Councillor Butler?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Any other councillors? Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. In regards to the pond that's there now, I don't know if we have the answer for that or not. What are their plans for that pond? Again, going into drainage and everything else, is that pond filled naturally? Or are they planning on closing that pond or just leaving it as is and have a nice skating rink?
Ms. Dilwari, would you have any background on that?
Through your worship, to the councillor, my understanding when we had the meeting, the pre-consultation meeting with the applicant, it was my understanding that it is an artificial pond which was used for trout fishing. But I do not know what is the intent of this pond. I'm not aware that they have not mentioned to me, the applicant hasn't mentioned to me that this would be filled in. But we have the owner in attendance and maybe he would be able to answer that question.
Okay, well, we'll go to that when Mr. White or the owner speaks to us. Any other members of council? So just one question that I would have, Ms. Dilwari. The current parcel has just about 6 hectares, just under 6 hectares in total. And this calls for a reduction for both the remnant parcel and the new parcel to be created so that neither will be close to 6 hectares. Why would that be good planning?
Through your worship, this is our official plan and zoning bylaw promotes infill development. And when we are assessing an infill lot, we have to assess whether the lot area is sufficient to have a single detached dwelling, the amenity area for the residents, and most critically, sufficient area to accommodate a septic bed. And in this situation, both these parcels are sufficiently sized to accommodate the septic bed. And we are not, and especially in this situation, we are not having the new lot creation would have no impact on the natural heritage features which are existing on the easterly parcel. So in my view, that is good planning, sufficient area for the single detached dwelling, amenity areas, and sufficient area for septic and protecting the natural heritage features.
So then why would the zoning require 6 hectare parcels? The current zoning.
So the current zoning is based on the rural zone as a whole, which requires 6 hectares, and depending upon whether, but when we are looking into the infill lots, we can reduce the zoning requirements depending upon individual cases and depending upon the individual. Like every parcel would be assessed based on its merit, but on a whole general area, the rural requirement is 6 hectares, so it's sufficiently sized. It's not encumbered by any natural heritage features. Septic would be sufficient. And also a replacement area is provided for the septic bed.
Thank you. And then finally, I know that we have permitted some rezonings to the east. And I know that historically there have been severances to the west. Are those parcels all approximately a hectare or 1.5 hectares or thereabouts? Do you know?
I worship, I don't recall, but I believe most of them were over a hectare for sure.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions of Ms. Dilwari? Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Anamika, I'm a little confused as to the good planning justification. Was it not good planning that the minimum lot area be 6 hectares in the original? When we originally laid out the minimum lot area or lot size for development or homes?
Through your worship to the councillor, we have regional policies and the provincial policies and our official plan policies. All those planning documents talk about the infill requirements, and the provincial policies also allowed us to have infill lots where it's not going to have any stress on the existing servicing, not in this situation, there are no servicing, like the septic bed and the private services and the natural heritage features. If those requirements are fulfilled, then in my view, that is good planning. And all these, and this planning report has been reviewed by the region, and it's in compliance with our official plan, compliance with our regional policy plan, and also the provincial policy statement.
Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. And just to go back to the flooding issue, I think you showed a slide where they showed the water course of 6 Mile Creek. And I don't know that we need to go to the slide, but what I just trying to remember, I think NPCA requires a 30-meter buffer, right, from any water course. So does that cover like the 50 and 100 year flooding or flood events, that buffer?
That's a little side of the point, because this, the creek is some distance from this parcel. Ms. Dilwari, do you have a comment on Councillor Lubberts' question?
Yeah, is it more than 30 meters?
It's way more than 30 meters. Could you pull up the map again, Ms. Dilwari?
Yeah, for sure. Through your worship, this creek is more than, I mean, like Councillor Lubert has said it rightly, you require 30-meter buffer, but this is way more than 30 meters.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure, yeah. All right. Yeah,
However, that does highlight the concerns that Councillor Butler has raised with respect to the potential for overland flooding if 6 Mile Creek overflows its banks. Okay, are there any other members of council that wanted to ask Ms. Dilwari any questions? No, so then we're going to go to the proponent, either the owner of the property or the owner's agent, if they wish to address council.
Your worship, I have Mr. White here. We'll bring him in now. Mr. White, you should be able to unmute yourself and share your video. Perfect.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. White.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I've got a brief presentation, although Ms. Dilwari did cover the majority of the facts and can help to answer some of the questions that have been raised so far as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Just a quick summary of the proposal. This is a zoning bylaw amendment to facilitate a future application for a consent. The consent application has been submitted for review by a committee of adjustment, sort of pending the results of this meeting here. And ultimately, it's 6.05 hectares right now, the overall size of the lot. This shows a picture from the south looking north with the new parcel on the left-hand side of this picture and the existing house on the right with the floodplain area off on the right to the right of that house. So any flooding that would have come from that is certainly well beyond the floodplains of 6 Mile Creek and would have impacted that existing structure well in advance of the parcel further west. Another parcel, this is looking straight down with south being to the top of this photo, Centralia on the right, Nye on the bottom. So it's largely mowed lawn, this existing parcel with the house, existing house on the left-hand side. And this is an oblique view of a very similar location with Nye Road in the foreground, mowed lawn in the back, although it does look, it's just more of a hedgerow along the municipal right-of-way. And this is just basically an oblique view from slightly higher, with Centralia on the right-hand side. And that little bit of forested area on the south there is just the hedgerow adjacent to it, to Nye Road. This is the severance sketch that has been submitted, outlining the location of the proposed parcel, which does also include a road widening that had been requested for a daylight triangle and a road widening along Nye Road. Those are incorporated into this. With regard to the size of the parcels, that issue has been brought up. I did want to point out that this parcel here is actually larger than the parcels that are on right adjacent to it on the opposite side of Centralia to the west, and is also significantly larger than all of the parcels that exist to the northwest of here, west of Centralia and north of Nye. So this is, I would say, a good transition between those existing residences and then the larger parcels in the more rural area that exists to the east. So the zoning has been pointed out. We are rural in this area. You can see the parcel fabric for this, for the lands to the west, the rural residential. All of those other existing lots have been formed. And then the much smaller lots to the north and the rural residential northwest of Nye and Centralia. And you can see that the hazard area there is a fairly narrow area, which typically would represent the floodplain, and NPCA has reviewed this and not had any significant concerns with this. The matters requiring the deviations from the standard have been outlined by Ms. Dilwaria and here as well. Planning considerations, I have reviewed all of these planning documents, and I'm also of the opinion that it is good planning to do this. One point that I will bring up in response to Councillor Lubberts' statement with regard to the size. The most recent version of the provincial policy statement has been more conducive to encouraging intensification and infill lots, even in the rural areas. They are not only permitted, but encouraged to avoid more subdivisions in rural areas as well. So part of the planning paradigm that exists now is slightly different from when the zoning was created. And we do have at that time something that would have probably encouraged more rural preservation type of approach than the current planning paradigm under the 2020 provincial policy statement, which encourages some development within that area. Regarding the flooding, I do live just down the street from here and did not have any significant issues. As a matter of fact, I've had far worse flooding at my place than has been the case over this past weekend. And do not envision that, I'll let the owner speak to this if he is available, Mr. Savage. The larger parcel right now is owned by his mother. And part of the purpose for this is to create a parcel for he and his wife to build a house and be adjacent to her as she gets older. But I don't believe that they've had a history of flooding in this area. The floodplain is fairly well defined along 6 Mile Creek in this area. And all of those ponds, Mr. Savage does do landscaping work, have been man-made ponds. So the amount of stormwater storage capacity on this parcel is significantly greater than what would normally be the case of any of the adjacent subdivisions or agricultural fields or anything like that as well. So there is a fair amount of capacity there for such events. And I'll leave Mr. Savage, if he is available, to make a comment about anything that may have occurred over this past weekend.
Thank you, Mr. White. Before I go to members of council, does the owner wish to address council?
I can bring them in now, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Lee, I'm just going to stop your screen share so we can see everyone again. And Savages have just joined us. Should be able to hear us now. Unmute yourself and share your video if you wish.
Yep. Hello, everyone. Hello, Your Worship.
You've heard some of the questions that members of council have raised, and you've heard Mr. White's comments and those of Ms. Dewaria. Was there something that you wanted to perhaps respond to and maybe give us a little bit more background?
Absolutely. There were a couple things. The flooding, I've lived there ever since I was 13 years old. My dad, he built the house and ponds and all that sort of stuff. 6 Mile Creek, you know, we used to canoe down it when it would get some water in it in the spring. It never once came close. It's set too low compared to where my mother's house is. It never once had an issue of overflow. It would, what's the word? It would definitely in the spring, there would be a lot more water in it, but it never had any flooding issues. And his pond there, it's about an acre. It can hold a lot of water. And once again, since I was 14 years old, I'm almost 40. I've never once seen that thing come anywhere near the top of the pond. Our intent for the pond is to leave it be. It's actually quite nice. There's a lot of animals. Like I said, I've grown up there. I'm trying to be closer to my mother, who's getting older, and she's by herself, and she's maintaining that whole place by herself with a little bit of help from us when we have time. So it's a two-way street. I want her to be closer to her grandkids as well. But the pond would generally stay the same. We would clear a little bit of brush from the sides, but it's always been a nice spot to look at. And the size of the lot, I heard a question about the size of the lot, and there are a number of new lots within the past 2 years to the east on Nye Road that were, you know, we grew up beside the Flakes. They own the farm there forever, and they've been severed off into hectare parcels too. So I think there is a precedence maybe there that why we even had the idea in the first place that this was possible was because that was allowed. And so I guess those are the only points I would like to make.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's very helpful background. So do any members of council have any questions of Mr. White or of the Savages? Oh, that you got off the hook very easily there. I guess your history of the area has been helpful. And thank you both, and thank you, Mr. White.
Thank you.
So then we'll now go to the clerk. Ms. Schofield, have you received any information subsequent to the preparation of the report that's on our agenda this evening?
No, I have not, Your Worship.
Okay, so then Mr. Butler, I'm going to ask if you will ask if there's anyone who wishes to speak in favor of the application, other than obviously the owners or the owner's agent.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, so if there's anyone in the attendee area that wishes to speak in favor of the application, now would be the time to raise your virtual hand. I'm seeing none, Your Worship.
Okay, then perhaps you're going to ask if there's anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the application or ask any questions of council with respect to the application.
Yeah, as His Worship has said, if anyone else is in the attendee area wishing to speak in opposition of the application or just has any questions of council, now would be the time to raise your virtual hand. I'm seeing none, Your Worship.
Okay, then I'm going to declare this public meeting closed, and we'll be dealing with this matter later on the agenda when the report comes up. Okay, that takes us to the Regional Councillor's report, and I don't think Councillor Insina is here, is he? Mr. Butler, I didn't notice.
No, I'm not seeing the Regional Councillor here, Your Worship.
So we're going to move on then. There are no presentations or delegations this evening. there is a consent agenda, and Councillor Noyes, you have the recommendation regarding the consent agenda.
Yes, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dubanow. The council approves the consent agenda items as recommended.
Questions or comments with respect to any of the items in the consent agenda? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. I just wanted to comment on PDS 62-2021, the contract for property standards enforcement, refuse and debris. I'm very much in support of this, but I did have a conversation with Mr. Shadover earlier, because I don't want the public to think that the contracted cost would cover also the administration costs, which are totally separate from the contract costs and can be significant. That they will be responsible for both the contract, what the contractor charges the town, and plus the administration fee. And I just wanted to mention that.
Anything further, Councillor Noyes?
Nothing further.
Any other members of council? If there are none, then I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the recommendations in the consent agenda? None opposed, that is carried. That then takes us to reports. And Councillor Zanko, you have the resolution regarding the first report.
No, I don't, Your Worship.
Don't have the resolution number 2?
No.
Okay, so does anyone have resolution number 2? If not, then Councillor Zanko, would you be prepared to move that council approves the amendment to the town's zoning bylaw number 12990 as detailed in Appendix 3 of report number PDS 60-2021 for the lands known as 2751 Nye Road, and further that council authorizes staff to prepare the necessary bylaw. This is the recommendation report relative to the public meeting that we just heard.
Yes, I will move that.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Butler. Are there any questions or comments with respect to the report and the recommendations? I just had one, I think we're all, as members of council, so the staff is aware, I think all of the elected officials are a little concerned about the growth of the community recently and the fluctuation in the flood mapping and the impacts of these severe rain and storm events that we receive. And I'm just wondering, Mr. Stojanovich, this may not be fair to put you on the carpet on this, but you did mention that going forward, infrastructure needs to take into account climate change. So going forward, are we going to be looking at, in an infrastructure way, at greater resiliency in some of the infrastructure that we are going to be constructing and that we will require for new subdivisions, as an example?
Through Mayor Redekop, absolutely, we will be looking at increased resiliency. I will give you an example. I mean, one of the examples that comes to mind quickly is the Point Avenue area and the need there for the shore wall and taking into account some of the higher lake levels that we've experienced down there. So that's, I think, one clear example that folks can understand what climate resiliency might mean for us. But just in terms of the watercourse flooding there, the mapping there is all governed through the NPCA, and it's really up to that agency to determine whether they need to adjust or update their mapping to accommodate climate change within what they're doing, and then also map that out. That exercise would take them many, many years to complete, so we wouldn't see any kind of updated mapping from them for quite some time.
I need a second. Yeah, okay. So who was the seconder on this? Was it Councillor Dubanow? No, Councillor Butler. Thank you, Mr. Stojanovich. And then Ms. Dolch, in terms of the planning, I think it would be a great comfort to members of council as we go forward with some of these planning changes, whether it's a zoning, whether it's a new subdivision, et cetera, to know that the climate change is something that's also foremost in the minds of our planners as they're making recommendations to us. Because we're not the experts on some of these things, but we do live in the community. We're familiar with the community, and we know what people are encountering, as do you. But will there be some greater focus on the impacts of climate change as we receive recommendations from the planning department?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, we can provide a blurb from now on climate change, but just to keep in mind that the region of Niagara is taking on the Resiliency for Climate Change program. They are working on that policy threshold now. I haven't yet seen a draft of that. I'm looking forward to it as we move along in the regional official plan work, because that will set our focus as well at the local level. We may enhance upon them and other things. We can do that through our own official plan, but they will serve as the basis for climate change.
Thank you. Before we move to vote, are there any other questions or comments by members of council? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor of the recommendation? None opposed. That is carried. That takes us then to PDS 61-2021, and Councillor Noyes, I believe you have that resolution.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott. On PDS 61-2021, request for permission to apply for minor variance application within 2 years of a zoning bylaw amendment in the Peace Bridge Phase 2 subdivision, Ashton Homes in brackets Western Limited. Owner Jansen Consulting Agent, that council grants permission for the submission of a minor variance applications within 2 years of the passing of the zoning bylaw amendment for Peace Bridge Village Phase 2 subdivision in brackets bylaw number 36-2020 for 392 and 402 Hummel Crescent, 423, 428, 436, 441 Williams Crescent, and 434 and 452 Viking Street, in accordance with subsection 45 in brackets 1.4 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, C.P.13.
Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. I'm just going to pull it up again because my screen turned off. In regards to some of the requests for the changes, I think in the lot size and things like that, it sounds like it's the homeowner requesting it. Like this person wants a bigger house on the property, and that may be why we're going to be doing variances in the future. It seems like it's like this person wants, well, basically, I think the three of the four or five variances that the company is going to probably be coming back to us are requests from homeowners or potential homeowners that they want their house bigger. And I do understand that when it comes forward, we do have an opportunity of saying no, but I just wanted to bring it to council's attention. It's basically the wishes of a homeowner to build a bigger house on the lot.
Any other members of council? So just for clarification, this report was prepared by Kara Rate. So Ms. Dolce, I'm going to be looking to you. The letter from the developer indicates that two of these parcels, they're catch basins, so there would be a requirement for a minor variance because of that. And then there's an indication that 4 of the lots, the lot coverage has changed since the original zoning bylaw. So they're requesting a 2% change in the lot coverage. Exactly what does that mean?
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Worship. So in terms of, I'll start with the catch basins. In terms of the catch basins.
Good with the catch basins. I'm just wondering about the change in the zoning bylaw that made it necessary for the developer to request a minor variance for the 4 lots that are referenced.
Thank you, Worship. So in terms of the 2% increased lot coverage, it resulted due to a recent change in the zoning bylaw. So when they did their original planning, they thought 60% would be adequate based on their designs, but in a few of the lot situations, and in this case, there was 4, they actually exceeded that just based on the current lot size of those individual lots. So they did not notice at the time that those were going to be needed, but as they did their detailed design work and put in their actual model homes, they realized that they had 2% increase in coverage, actually above the 60% on those 4 units.
And then the other 2 that are referenced is an indication that they want larger units, slightly larger units. Would that be the owner that's going to purchase, or would that be the developer that wants to build and sell? Do you know?
Your Worship, thank you. Your Worship, my understanding is the homeowner making the request to enlarge the home bigger than the original design plan proposed.
So does this run into the notion that we've discussed in the past that we need to have more affordable? These may not be affordable. I don't know that. We need affordable housing, which means not bigger houses on smaller lots, but smaller houses on smaller lots or smaller accommodations. Does this run afoul of that in your mind, or is that just in my mind?
Thank you, Your Worship. In this case, the ones that are asking for the larger homes on the small lots are definitely not affordable units. They're single detached dwellings in this subdivision. They're well above our affordable housing price of $350,000 for sale. So these wouldn't qualify as an affordable housing unit, regardless of even the current standard, if they developed under the current standard. So if that answers.
Well, I didn't anticipate that these would be affordable, but I suppose if the argument is that you can build as big a house as you want on whatever size of lot, as long as you can afford it, well then, yeah, it's not an affordability issue. I think the challenge, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, we had an affordable housing report last week where we talked about encouraging people to build smaller houses on smaller lots. And really the staff was recommending that we severely limit how big single family dwellings could be built in this town. I think they were suggesting 20% of the whole housing inventory. That didn't necessarily address this particular issue, which is townhouses or other units that again will be larger than what was anticipated for the lot. So are we getting convoluted on this issue? Am I making too much of an issue out of these 2 or 4 or 6 condo units in a new development? If I were you, I wouldn't answer that question. That wouldn't be, I don't think there's a satisfactory answer for me, but do you understand my anxieties here? You know, we're trying to encourage people, or going forward, we're trying to encourage builders to build houses that might be a little smaller. And we've got builders wanting to keep building bigger houses because that's what people are telling them they want. We know that. We know that people want bigger houses, but that doesn't help us with the affordability issue, does it?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, and I do appreciate your concerns. I understand where you're going, and that's why through our affordable housing initiatives that we've been taking on through the OP policies, we are looking at making sure we do have those smaller homes on smaller lots and not these larger homes on smaller lots. We are looking at that initiative right now. Obviously, you've seen the first drafts of it. So we are looking at that. In terms of this request specifically, we haven't necessarily assessed all the merits of the minor variance application. We're not there yet. This is just a request to consider them in front of the committee. Planning staff hasn't necessarily taken a position. When the application was first discussed with us, all we were aware was the 2% lot coverage increase. The additional ones came in after the fact, but they're presented to you to determine if you want to pass a resolution to allow them to apply for a minor variance. At that point in time, we'll consider the merits of the requests through minor variance and whether or not they meet the 4 tests of a minor variance.
Right, and this seems to really run right smack into the face of what the provincial government was attempting to dissuade developers from doing, doesn't it? Here we are, we're less than 2 years from a zoning change, and we've got the developer wanting to build larger houses because he can sell them. Larger condo units.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, in this case, we didn't feel it did run afoul to the Planning Act provision of the moratorium, only because when they did their original request for zoning amendment, when they applied, they didn't request anything for lot coverage. If in fact they would have requested lot coverage at that time, we would have had concerns of them bringing it back again for a second time through minor variance, trying to again circumvent that zoning process that was already undertaken. In this case, they are asking for all new changes, not in accordance with the previous amendment. So we felt that it was acceptable in that regard to recommend the resolution be passed.
Thank you. Are there any other members of council that have any questions? Councillor Noyes, then Councillor Lubberts.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. I don't know if this is along the same vein as what you were commenting on, but it goes back to, I said 3, it was 2 homeowners that want a larger unit. Can we take those 2 out of this request? From what I understand from Ms. Dolch is that this was new information to the planning staff, and it was kind of like added after the fact, and that the planning staff hasn't really had a chance to weigh in on whether they would support it or not. I'm just somewhat concerned that having it in this report, and it kind of sounds like we're kind of going down that road. If I was the homeowner of lot 15 or the homeowner of lot 32, I would think this is just pretty much a done deal, that type of thing. And that at some point this might come back at us saying, well, you didn't put up any opposition when it came before council, knowing that this was going to be coming forward down the road. I'm just, not sure whether we're opening up ourselves that in the future we can't say no to these 2 particular lots. I have no problem with the catch basins, but I do have a problem with the homeowner wanting to change the lot coverage because they want a bigger house.
Ms. Dolch.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the councillor. It is within the purview of council to restrict only certain ones that move forward or not under resolution. You can modify the recommendation to do so if you wish. In terms of whether or not you supporting the resolution to allow them to apply for a minor variance, that does not hold the municipality in any way to support it through minor variance. That is based on its own merits through a separate application, through public consultation. It has its own program that we run through and tests we have to run through for that. And the planners will make independent recommendations to the Committee of Adjustment. The only difference here is it will not go forward to council. If you do pass this resolution, obviously it will go through the Committee of Adjustment minor variance process.
Councillor Noyes.
So it may or may not come back before council in regards to the lot coverage and things like that.
No, it won't come back. That's a minor variance. It will go before the Committee of Adjustment if we approve the request.
Today, yes, that's what I think I'm thinking. But we can't, I'm concerned about the homeowner not knowing who they are, getting the impression that this is pretty much a done deal. And then obviously the developer knows who the homeowners are because they've already had a request. I'm not terribly comfortable with lot 15 and lot 32 myself, but I don't know what the rest of council feels.
Anything further, Councillor Noyes?
Nothing further.
Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. My question to Kira, did I hear you say earlier that the 4 units are already built and the developer didn't realize that they were bigger than what was allowed?
Ms. Dolch.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the councillor. No, I apologize if I did say that. No, they did detailed design work as they were doing their detailed work. They noticed that the 4 lots didn't meet lot coverage, whereas all the others did. They just missed those in the detailed design work.
Oh, so nothing's been built.
No.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, any other councillors? Well, I'm going to call the question on the recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, that takes us to the next, no, there are no reports, so that takes us then to new business. And that is the selection of new chairs and vice chairs for the various committees. But before I go there, is anyone interested in moving from where you are now? Don't overwhelm me with your hands going up. So, Madam Clerk, it looks like everyone is quite happy where they are. I suppose the only question is whether we would want to change chairs and vice chairs. But so far, what we've been doing is somewhat consulting those on the committees, and you need to have that by resolution as well.
If I would suggest that what I do is I read this out with the current chairs and vice chairs for council to vote on.
And then come back with something for us to look at. And we can do that at the committee meeting in August, I suppose.
No, we can do it right now.
Oh, you want to do it right now? Okay, sure.
Sure. Okay, so the council appoints the following chairs and vice chairs to the business subdivisions of council and committee for the period of August 1st, 2021 to November 14th, 2022. Corporate and Community Services, chair would be Councillor McDermott, vice chair Councillor Butler. Planning and Development Services, chair Councillor Dubanow, vice chair Councillor Zanko. Infrastructure Services, chair, let me see here, Councillor Lubberts, and vice chair Councillor Noyes. And we just need a mover and a seconder for it.
So, Madam Chair, just before we go there, in the past, there has been some changing of chairs and vice chairs during the course of the term. And so I suppose, and I think we've done that every 6 months or thereabouts, but we can leave that up to the chairs and the vice chairs themselves if they wish to change.
Yes, the change is every 8 months. I would suggest if they would like to change, they should do it now just to keep the rhythm, but we can leave it as is and wait for the 8-month period.
Okay, so let me ask members of council, does anyone wish to change their status as chair or vice chair at the moment?
I would like to.
Councillor Butler?
Yeah, if it's okay with Councillor McDermott, I'd like to be chair this time around.
Okay, so we'll switch those two.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Okay, so then do I have a mover then for the slate that has been outlined by the clerk, Councillor McDermott, seconder, Councillor Dubanow? Any further questions or comments? All those in favor of the recommendation? That is carried. Okay. We also have a memorandum with respect to the BIA, and Councillor Butler, you have the Ridgeway BIA. Councillor Butler, you have that motion.
I do. Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott that Council appoints Dale Bear to the Ridgeway Business Improvement Area Board of Management for the period ending November 14th, 2022.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? That is carried. Are there any other items of new business? Councillor Zanko.
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually have a couple items, if that's okay. The first question that I have through you to Mr. Stevanovic, I'm wondering, I've had a couple calls with regard to the streetlights, and I know we received an update several months ago that the LED lights were on back order, and we were trying to expedite this from the manufacturer, with the manufacturer. Some of my residents are saying now that there's been a 19-month delay so far. And the question is there any update as far as timing and when we will receive the new LED lights for replacement?
Mr. Stojanovic, do you have any new information on that?
Through you, Mayor Redekop. No, unfortunately, Councillor Zanko, I don't have any further information on that. I know that they were pressing to get those LEDs in and get the lights fixed, but I don't have any further information than that.
Councillor Zanko, before we move to your next item, and you may have some further comments, Mr. Jansen, you're unfortunately the acting CAO. The CAO and the Director of Infrastructure Services aren't here. They would be the ones most familiar with this issue. But it seems to me that whether it's 19 months or 16 months or whatever it is, it's been a long time. And I know that the lawyer indicated that the service contract doesn't specify a time frame within which these lights are to be changed. But whatever the time frame is, it's not what in law would be considered, in my view, reasonable. And so I think we need to be looking at, and you can perhaps share this with the CAO and the Director of Infrastructure Services, we need to be looking at the possibility of giving notice to our service provider that this is not acceptable, and that if we can't get these lights dealt with within a specified period of time, we will look to hire an exterior service, and then we will bill our service provider for whatever additional costs we might have incurred, because this is unreasonable. And I know that there are in response to Councillor Zanko's email, where she forwarded an email from a resident, we were given an indication of how many outstanding lights there are, and it keeps growing as time goes by. So I wonder if you could perhaps take that up with the CAO and the Director of Infrastructure Services, probably our lawyer, just to make sure that I'm not too far out of the realm of possibility here. But this just is not acceptable. Any of us that are involved in providing service can't possibly think that 16 or 19 months is something that people should have to put up with. So can I leave that with you?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, you're quite right. There's a very high level of frustration here, and we'll look into that and get back to you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Zanko. Please proceed.
Thank you. My next question is, and I know that some of my colleagues have received similar complaints, but it's with regard to the coyote issue that there was some email communications circulating. I know that it's not likely that Ms. Dolt, and I'm not even sure who this would fall under. I'm thinking that possibly it might fall under the animal control bylaw. But I want to mention it so it is on our radar and we are looking at it, because I know that I have a couple residents that are feeling that, their yards are quite dangerous right now because they have this coyote issue living quite close to their yards. The SPCA apparently has told them that it does not fall under their jurisdiction. The province is saying that it's the responsibility of the municipality. So I would just like to really get this on someone's radar so we can figure this out and perhaps look at some solutions.
Thank you. So if Mr. Cookett were here, I would be shifting this to Mr. Cookett. And since he's not here, I'm going to shift it to his fill-in this week. So Mr. Jansen, that's something you could put on your list. Again, you should perhaps discuss that with the CAO when he returns next week so that we can get some understanding of how we would need to deal with this. There are some areas, specific areas that Councillor Zanko and other councillors perhaps can provide you with an email if they've received complaints as well. Okay.
Nothing further, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other items of new business? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. I actually have 3 items. One is to do with the storm and the rainfall, and I'm just wondering, like many of the other councils, I drove around and looked at certain areas that I thought might be problematic and that were, particularly in the new subdivision on River Trail. I looked at the storm retention pond there, and you could actually see the water from the road. So you can actually see that. So basically, the pond was full. But also in the ditch that comes from it, not the one that goes under into the culverts, but the open ditch was also full and was actually starting to overflow. And that the current in the ditch on the opposite side of the road was significant. You could really see the water. It was doing exactly what it was supposed to do, is taking the water out into the creek. But that there's one area that we're going to, it's a large ditch. It's going to be replaced with a swale. And Ms. Dolce and I talked about this, a month or so ago or 2 months ago, and the residents are very worried. So I actually went to see what would happen to that ditch during a rainfall like this. This ditch is probably around 6 feet, 7 feet deep, and probably about 8 feet wide. So it's not a typical ditch. It's almost like a tributary, to be perfectly honest. And that ditch, when we looked at it, when I looked at it with staff, really had no water in it at all. And when I looked at it this weekend, it was full. And there was, again, a very obvious current in it. And this is before the end of, there's another phase 3, I think, of River Trail that still has to be developed. And that's without that water coming in. And I know that the engineering plan is that the water is supposed to be moved around by the swales, and it's not supposed to go towards the creek, but it's supposed to go towards the storm retention pond. But I can tell you the water was coming and going down the creek behind these individuals' homes, and the ditch was full. It was not, whatever was existing currently was not taking the water in the direction that we had hoped it would. It was taking it behind these people's houses. So they're concerned. And I actually have a video and pictures of it. I will share that with Ms. Dolch later on so she can kind of see. The other one is nothing to do with the storm, but the retention pond on Hill Street. I'm wondering if there's a possibility of looking at improving the aesthetics of it and perhaps improving the functionality of it, because it really is an eyesore at the end of Hill Street. And my last issue is... Before you go, Mr. Stojanovic said something that you can look into? Is that something that you would look into, stormwater management plan?
Yep. We certainly will look at that, yes.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Noyes.
The last one, I'm happy to see that the Freeland Center is going to be, and the Boys and Girls Club is going to be offering swimming lessons again, and it's starting in August. And I'm just wondering, in the past, I think council has subsidized some of the swimming lessons.
Don't know about that, but that's something that staff can perhaps look into. Again, Mr. Stojanovic, that's Sean Hutton, and he's in infrastructure services, I believe. So perhaps you could find out if there's going to be any subsidization of swimming lessons at the EJ Freeland Center.
Certainly we can find out and let council know.
If I can, along that same point, again, I wasn't on council at the time, I don't think, but I thought that there was some transportation was provided from Ward 1 and 2 to the Freeland Center.
There's been some discussion about the municipality and the Boys and Girls Club collaborating on providing transportation for youth in the old town of Fort Erie, I guess you could say wards 1 and 2. And really, if we're going to do that, I suppose that we would want to make it available across the board, so that that's something that the CAO had been looking into. And now that we know that the EJ Freeland Center will be opening in August, I think that's for swimming lessons. And I think they're opening before that in general terms for swimming, at least based on the media release that was circulated to us. So we could maybe find out whether there will be an opportunity for transporting youth to the facility and working with Boys and Girls Club to allow some swimming times as well.
That's all. Thank you.
Are there any other items of new business? Then if you would just let me finish making my note here. Okay, that takes us to motions, and Councillor Noyes, I see that your motion is being deferred to August the 23rd. And Councillor Butler, you have a motion.
Was I supposed to do the resolution for Ridgeway, BIA, or did I? No, I
You
did
did
not.
that.
Sorry,
Yeah, we've
yeah,
done that.
sorry. Okay, yes, the resolution moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott that the animal bylaw number 73-2021 be amended by changing part 3.86B3 for agricultural, known as for agricultural property, a minimum of 5 acres of land, to for property, removing agricultural, a minimum of 3 acres of land.
Did you wish to speak to that?
Yes. I was going to move this at the time we were handling the animal bylaw, but it became a very long night, so I waited to do this. But the intent was to remove the word agricultural because if you have 3 acres of land, it should be sufficient enough to host 8 dogs at maximum.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. I'm going to support this, but I do have an inquiry in regards to, again, Stevensville being somewhat perhaps different than some of the other areas, that we have a very highly residential area on Stevensville Road, and right behind the first row of houses, there's agricultural. And I'm just wondering if those people who live in the residential areas, like in the homes that back onto the agricultural, have a problem with the 9 dogs in regards to noise or whatever. They do have some avenue to basically say, you know, you can't have your dogs barking all the time. I know when we're talking about 9, and if I had little children, I had 9 dogs, I'm not thinking about the little Shih Tzus, I'm thinking about the much larger dogs that I would have some concern about. Perhaps there has to be a separation, even or a fence or something, because right now there's no fence. It's just agricultural type thing that I want to make sure that the residents do have some avenue to make sure that it doesn't impede on their livelihood. And I'm sure there's probably something in the bylaw that will do that.
That was a question to be answered by someone.
Not really.
Okay.
I think it's gonna, one of these things, when it happens, we'll have to deal with it.
Any other councillors? I'm going to, Councillor Lubberts. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. I'm just wondering if our Ms. Dolch, did you talk with the SPCA about this at all, as to whether they had any input?
Ms. Dolch?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you, the councillor. No, I have not talked to them about this.
Okay, thank you. Any reason why?
Any reason why Ms. Dolch wouldn't have consulted the SPCA? Is that your question?
Yes.
Is that the question?
Yeah, that's the question, yeah.
Ms. Dolch?
Thank you, Your Worship. I didn't consult. It was a notice of motion. If council wishes to direct us to speak to the SPCA before considering the motion further, I can definitely do that, but I didn't at the time, no.
Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, and thank you. And I guess the same question, did you consult with the people that put together our new animal control bylaw? Did you talk to them about it at all? Do they have any concerns?
Is that Ms. Dolch that you're asking?
Yeah.
Ms. Dolch?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, we spoke to them briefly. I also did a map comparison as well to look at the difference between agricultural properties in terms of 3 acre versus 5 acre to see the impact. There wasn't a significant impact in the changes between a 3 acre or a 5 acre parcel of agriculturally designated lands and zone.
There was or there wasn't?
Was not.
Oh, there was. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
So Ms. Dole, just for clarification, you mentioned agricultural land, but my understanding is this motion removes agriculture from the wording. Is that not correct, Councillor Butler?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it would be 3 acres anywhere. Does your mapping reflect that, Ms. Dolge?
Thank you, Worship. No, it does not. At the time, I assumed it was just for agricultural. I didn't do all properties, all 3 acre properties in the town.
Any other questions or comments? I'll call the question. All those in support of the motion? Opposed? That is carried. That then takes us to Councillor Dubanow. You have a couple of motions.
Yeah, Your Worship. Actually, I'm wondering if I could withdraw them. With the news today, they're actually redundant, and I'm actually quite pleased that we seem to be moving in a positive direction on this issue. And I see. I said I was hedging my bets, and I guess the bet has been hedged, and there's no need to proceed with either of them, Your Worship.
That's great. I'd like to think that Minister Blair knew these were coming and decided that let's move forward.
I'll take that, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, then that would, so both of those motions, Madam Clerk, are being withdrawn, and then that takes us to where does that take us? That takes us to notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion to be given this evening? If there are none, then that takes us to bylaws. And are there any bylaws that anyone wishes removed from the package? If not, Councillor Lubberts, you have the motion for first and second reading of the bylaw package.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Looking at the agenda 37-2020, that's not on my list. Is that going to be dealt with separately?
It's already had first and second reading, so this will just be third and final reading for this evening.
Yeah, I don't have 37.
That's right, because it's already had first and second reading.
Well, all right, okay, all right.
So all we'll be doing this evening is third and final.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott that the bylaw package containing Bylaw 85-2021 to exempt a certain block 2, South Coast Village Phase 2, Plan 59M 430 from part lot control, Mars Homes, Crystal Beach Inc. Bylaw 86-2021 to authorize the execution of a subdivision agreement with 2834127 Ontario Limited, Frank Sacco, Royal Ridge Phase 1, Bylaw number 87-2021 to authorize the execution of a subdivision agreement with 2538070 Ontario Limited, Bryce Ivanchuk, Nye Road. Bylaw 88-2021 to amend zoning bylaw number 12990, Alexis Banfay, owner applicant 0-7103 Burley Road North, and bylaw 89-2021 to amend zoning bylaw 12990, Gorham Road Inc., owner Zanko Priamo Limited, applicant 409 Gorham Road is given first and second reading.
All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. That bylaw package is on the floor for any questions or comments. If there are none, Councillor McDermott, you have the resolution for third and final reading.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Butler. That bylaws 37-2020, 85-2021, 86-2021, 87-2021, 88-2021, 89-2021 are given third and final reading, be signed by the mayor and clerk under the corporate seal.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Councillor Butler, you have the resolution for first and second reading of the confirmatory bylaw.
I do, Your Worship. Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that bylaw number 90-2021 to confirm the actions of council at its council and committee meeting held on July 12th, 2021, and its council meeting held on July 19th, 2021 is given first and second reading.
All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Councillor Lubberts, you have the resolution for third and final reading of the confirmatory bylaw.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Redekop. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott. That bylaw number 90-2021 is given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and the clerk under the corporate seal.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. And that takes us to scheduling of meetings. Are there any meetings that anyone wishes to announce? If not, then I'm sorry, Councillor Dubanow, you have your hand up?
Yes, I did, Your Worship. I actually had two to announce this evening. The Fort Erie Public Library Board is going to be having a meeting tomorrow starting at 4:30. This is going to be actually an in-person meeting. We're actually happy to be able to meet together, and we're going to be doing that at the chair's home. And then also next week, we have, my apologies, Your Worship, I'm just going to the calendar. The Community Gaming Development Corporation is going to be having a board meeting at 5:30 on Wednesday, July 28th. That's going to be hosted through Zoom, Your Worship.
Okay. If there are no other meetings, then Councillor Dubanow, I'm going to ask you to move to adjourn.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Noyes, that council adjourns at 7:31 p.m. to reconvene into a special meeting of council on July 26, 2021.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you, everyone.